Hi guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to check for a current draw from the battery. So common customer complaints will be that the battery goes flat after the vehicle has been parked up for a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, okay? Maybe the battery has been tested, the alternator has been tested, and both the battery and the charging system have tested to be okay. But still, after the vehicle is parked up, the battery goes flat, okay? So this can take a few days to occur, depends how much current is leaving the battery when the vehicle is locked up, okay? So there's a few different ways we can test this. So I'm going to show you maybe 3 different methods, all right, okay? So the first method is the method we used to always use before, but it's no longer recommended, okay? That's where we use a multimeter in series with the battery to measure the current drain. So what is an allowable current drain? What's kind of recommended as a ballpark figure is 50 milliamps, which is 0.05 of an amp. Okay, now again, different manufacturers may state different values if they state them at all. I know some vehicles could be as low as maybe 10 milliamps of a current draw when the vehicle is locked up. So the first thing to do is to prepare the vehicle. So we want to be able to gain access to the car during this test, but still that the vehicle thinks that all the doors are still locked up, so that when it's locked up, that the doors are meant to be closed. So what we do is we trip the door locks. So you could do this with all 4 doors. We're going to pull the bonnet. Okay, and even with the bonnet, we're going to trip the bonnet lock here as well, because there's a switch on that, just in case that has any effect. We want to make sure that the vehicle thinks that the bonnet is closed. And we'll do the same here with the front passenger door as well. And just flip that switch. Okay, now, so to do this test, we need to gain access to the battery, and we're going to remove the battery's negative terminal. Okay, so for this I just need a 10 spanner, and we disconnect the negative terminal from the battery. So just place it down here for a second so it doesn't spring back and inadvertently touch off the battery terminal here. And this is quite difficult to do now with one hand, so let's see how we go. All right. So what I've done here is I've changed the red lead in my meter here to the 10 amp position, and I'm going to turn my meter on to read maximum of 10 amps. Okay. Now that's fused in this meter, so if we exceed 10 amps, we will pop the fuse in the meter. Okay. So the red probe of my amp meter should go to the more positive side of the circuit, so that goes to the battery connection. And the black probe goes directly onto the battery. Okay, so now any current returning to the battery has to go through a meter. So we're measuring all the current that's leaving the battery. At the moment, 0.51. Okay, so the next thing to do is to lock the car. And as I lock it, you'll see the current will increase. It will probably close to about 10 amps. So I went to just over 8 amps there as I did that. So now we're reading, the car is locked, we're reading 0.6 of an amp. At the moment that's too high, but you can see it's dropping off. So different systems are dropping off to sleep, the communication systems are dropping off there as well, and eventually, hopefully, we will get down to our allowable level of 50 milliamps. At the moment we're at 0.1 of an amp. That's 100 milliamps, that's twice the limit. It can take a bit of time for each system to shut down, okay? I remember when one car I was working on, it took 40 minutes each time for it to drop off, and that was normal for that particular car, okay? Now we're down to 0.06 of an amp, which is 60 milliamps. And sometimes you just need to give it a couple of minutes, okay? And I think with this particular model, it can drop down to about 0.01 of an amp, which is 10 milliamps. So here we're working on an old Volkswagen Jetta. And there we can see that it's still reading. And now she's after dropping off, okay? So again, because I'm on the 10 amp scale, it's not going to be very accurate. There is probably still a few milliamps returning to the battery at this stage, but our meter is registering 0, okay? All right? But in reality, I would say, I think in this car it's about 10 or 15 milliamps but it's just not picking it up there now because we're on the 10 amp scale. Okay. Now the reason why this method isn't recommended is because for me to insert that meter in series like this, I had to disconnect the battery. And by disconnecting the battery, I could have reset certain control units in the car so the problem mightn't even exist now for maybe weeks before the problem could come back. So it's not recommended to do that. Also, by disconnecting the battery, you might need to go off and get radio codes. You have to reinitialize your Windows. You might need to set the clock and so on and so forth. You have lots of other jobs now that you have to do before this car is returned to the customer. So it's not very recommended to do it by this method. Okay. So what I'll do now next is I'll unlock the car. Okay. It's going to open this door. And I'm going to reconnect the battery. Okay, so it's going to disconnect my lead here. And I'm just going to place the connection on the battery there for a second. Now it is possible to do this with a meter without ever disconnecting the power supply from the vehicle. Now how you do that is this, okay? What you have to do is you get another cable for yourself that you're going to extend your multimeter cable. So I just have an extension lead here. I'm going to take one of the crocodile clips from my meter. I'm going to put that onto my crocodile clip, and I'm going to put that crocodile clip to a good earth, a good body negative on the vehicle. And a good earth here on this particular car is simply the door striker. So just put this onto the door striker. So that's a good earth point. Okay. So take out this lead, and I'm going to push. So this is coming now from the door striker. I'm going to put my red probe of my meter. Again, difficult to do with one hand. I'm going to put that on here, like so. Okay. Now, I'm going to get my black probe. So another method that I could use is all you have to do is slacken off your battery connection, put your amp meter, black lead onto the center of the battery terminal like so. Okay. Sorry, no. There you can see the reading. So at the moment, all the electrons are returning back to that battery via the earth strap. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to lock the car. Sorry, I just need to close the driver's door again. So I'm going to lock the car. I'm going to put this probe right down on top of the battery negative pole, and then simply bring this into view here as well so you can see what's happening. I'm going to lift the negative connection off the pole of the battery, and as soon as I do that, the electrons then have to revert to traveling back from the door striker through the meter and back to the battery. Okay, so we're reading 0.1 of an amp, 100 milliamps. If I put this back down on top of the battery again, we're back to 0 because now the electrons are traveling back through the earth strap here. Okay, so every time I lift this off, current will travel through the meter back to the battery, and we can get a reading. Now we're down to 0.06, which is 60 milliamps. The beauty of using this method is the electrical system is never disconnected from the battery throughout the test. We always keep a connection to the vehicle's electrical system, so we don't reset any control units, and also you don't have to go off and get radio codes or any of that. And you can do this with your multimeter, so you don't need to go off and get an expensive tool for measuring current flow. And lift this off again, and now our battery drain is back to close to 0 again. Okay, so, and you could come over here every now and again throughout the day and keep testing this just in case that the battery drain comes and goes. Okay, so that's another method we can use. That's the recommended method. Now I'm just going to tighten back up this earth strap, or the earth connection. Again, they should have a particular torque. Small squeeze is all they need. Now another tool you can use for this is your amp clamp, okay? Now I don't think these are as accurate as using a multimeter, but they do give you a fair indication of what's happening. So what we do first is you turn it on and measure a maximum of 40 amps. Even with this removed, it's reading 1.08 of an amp. So what you have to do is zero this with the clamp closed. So you press the 0 button, which is relative, and there it's reading close to 0. So you put this around the cable going onto the battery. Try to keep it centered if you can, and you take a reading. So at the moment we're reading 0.0. Well, it's reading 0 at the moment. It was flickering there. It's flickering there to about 10 milliamps, which is 0.01, 0.02, which is 20 milliamps. Try to keep that centered, okay? Now, these are more expensive, but you don't need to disconnect the battery, which is a good advantage. They're quick to use as well, all right? And they're quite accurate. So if I unlock my car, you can see the reading has increased. We're now up to just over 1 amp. Lock the car again. There's a, and now it's reading 0.7 of an amp, 0.5 of an amp. So again, that should keep dropping off down to a limit that we're happy with. Now it's reading minus here because I just have it on the wrong way around, but it's easier to see it this way. So I'm just going to leave it like that, okay? If I turned it around and had it the other way, then it wouldn't read minus. Then we're down to 0.4 of an amp, 0.36. And again, hopefully different systems are going off to sleep. So the communication, when I mean systems are going off to sleep, sometimes there's communication between control units using one of the networking systems, and they might still communicate maybe for a couple of minutes after the vehicle has been locked, and different systems then will start to drop off after a while, okay? And again, you keep monitoring that until it drops down to an allowable level. And basically all we're trying to do here is determine if we have a problem or not. If it does turn out that we have an unacceptable current draw from the battery, well then we have to start locating where that current draw is. Okay, and there's again different methods that we can use for that as well, including a voltage measurement across fuses actually, and we can determine if current is flowing across any fused circuits. Okay. Common problems might be, that I've come across, be door control modules in some of these type of cars and radios. Now it's staying quite high here for the minute. Again, with this particular car, it's not consistent in how long it takes the different systems to drop off. It's now gone down to 0.19 of an amp, 200.2, which is 200 milliamps roughly. And again, that should start to drop off there now in a second. So we leave it at that. Okay, so there are just 3 methods, and the last 2 methods are the 2 methods that I'd recommend. That way you don't have to disconnect the battery from the vehicle's electrical system. Okay?